Hi, my name is Jared and this is Horror Obsession. Today, I want to talk about Evil Dead Rise, written and directed by Lee Cronin, the newest in the Evil Dead franchise. I talked about Evil Dead 2013 recently, and check that video out if you're curious about my thoughts on the other movies, as I am just going to talk about Rise today. Before we get into spoilers, my general thoughts. This movie sucks. I kind of hated it. I was afraid this was going to be a soulless cash grab, and it seems like I was pretty much right. I didn't hate absolutely everything about this movie, but it feels so generic. The possession subgenre has always been one of my least favorite subgenres of horror, but The Evil Dead had previously managed to stand out from the bunch by pushing the boundaries of the grotesque violence to places most supernatural horror wouldn't dare go. While most movies are busy sliding chairs across the floor, Evil Dead was having people saw off their own arms. Evil Dead Rise doesn't totally disregard the savagery of the decent 2013 remake, but they tone it down to a place where it feels like just another possession movie now. It is hard to explain exactly what I mean without getting into spoilers, so just know if you are thinking of watching this, maybe you should. I was pretty disappointed and probably won't check out the inevitable next movie in theaters, but it is probably worth checking this movie out so you can see for yourself how low the franchise has sunk. Alright, so I knew we were in trouble with this movie from the opening scene. Evil Dead Rise takes the classic setup of a group of friends out in the woods when one of them gets possessed, and it starts off with typical horror movie stuff like the slow walk up to a possessed person with their back turned. The anticipation of what you will see is a classic way to build tension, so no complaints there. The possessed girl ends up ripping the hair off the other girl, basically scalping her, before going out to the lake to claim some more victims. This is when I knew we were in trouble, since it shows the possessed girl grab a drone random bro is flying around, and I thought, okay, here we go, and braced myself for some horrific self-inflicted violence. But instead, they show her pull the drone blades toward her face, then quickly cut away to a zoomed out wide shot before we see anything. She falls into the water and instead we just see some red coming up. Major yikes. I don't watch horror movies just for the violence, though it is obviously a big part of the genre. Anyone who is obsessed with horror like me has sat through hours and hours of gratuitous violence. But despite this, the 2013 remake delivered with unique and interesting violence that somehow made it feel fresh again. I applauded the director of that movie for having the guts to hold the camera on the violence and make the audience tolerate what was on screen. Evil Dead Rise only does this like once or twice, and on much, much milder things such as a knife through the arm. In another instance later, instead of showing the demon kill a kid, we get a wide-angle lens shot and hear some quick sounds and see the kid fly against the wall. A guy gets his eye bit off, but they don't really show that either, though to their credit they do at least show the aftermath for a few seconds. I don't know, I feel weird saying the fatal flaw of this movie was holding back on the violence too much, but I couldn't help but feel like they toned it down intentionally to appeal to a broader audience. In an attempt to make more money at the box office, the exact opposite of what I praised Evil Dead 2013 for doing. Another major flaw was the characters. They have one identifiable trait. For example, the sister works with music equipment and hates being called a groupie, the son mixes vinyl records in his room, the young daughter believes in ghosts, and the older daughter is, I don't know. I honestly don't know. She's so bland. The Evil Dead franchise isn't exactly known for its complex characters, and the series is full of one-note, shallow caricatures, not characters. This works, however, due to the aforementioned disgustingly brutal violence. You can tone down the violence if it is replaced by compelling character work, or if there is more of a story, but unfortunately they didn't really replace it with anything, which led to the feeling of blandness and eventually boredom. There is no greater sin than making a boring horror movie, and that is where we are with the franchise. In the past, the Evil Dead story goes basically as follows. Characters find the book, they either read the book or hear someone speak the words aloud, demon gets summoned, demon torments everyone, characters use the book to banish the demon. They wanted to change up the formula a bit for this one, but didn't want to undermine the established lore of the previous movies, so they have an earthquake expose a hidden church altar under which one of the kids finds the book. He listens to a vinyl recording on his handy vinyl retro sound mixer, and through extremely thrilling exposition voiceover, we get it explained to us that this is actually a different Book of the Dead, and there are 3, and this is a totally different one. So when things are almost exactly the same as before, but just a little different, don't bother complaining. What follows is a who's who of possession tropes ripped off from The Exorcist, such as possessed person throwing up, possessed person walking in a herky-jerky way, possessed person standing on ceiling, and you're probably thinking, hey, that isn't in The Exorcist, and you're right, that's Exorcist 3. Now, some of these tropes are present in the previous films, such as the possessed person temporarily returning to themselves, but they even get this wrong. In the 2013 film, the demon lets go and the person is back in their bodies, visually identifiable by their appearance and eyes turning back to normal. In this movie, the demon tries to manipulate the kids, but instead of fully turning back, it's just voice changes. I assume this is because they didn't want to get Alyssa Sutherland out of makeup, and I am sure Lee Cronin would say, "Oh, it is just a little bit different, because this is one of the other books of the dead," to which I would say, fuck off. The worst part about all of this is, the changes worked. The movie is going to gross about $100 million on a tiny $19 million budget, but I'm not surprised. Audiences typically lap up the stereotypical supernatural possession stuff, and this will be no exception. It makes me sad the franchise has resorted to copying every other possession movie out there, and it seems the spark that allowed Evil Dead 2013 to stand out is long gone. Welcome to the ranks, Evil Dead. You're now basically The Possession, or Pray for the Devil, or The Dark and the Wicked, or The Devil Inside, or The Devil's Doorway, or The Exorcism of God, or The Offering, or The Vatican Tapes, or The Pope's Exorcist, or The Last Exorcism Part 2, or The Possession of Michael King, or The Taking of Deborah Logan, or The Exorcism of Emily Rose, or The Last Rite, or, well, I think you get the picture. These movies are too cookie cutter and too bland, even for someone with a diabolical horror obsession.